I've been married to my wife for 6 years. We met in college, and she was this wild, fiery personality who seemed to light up every room she walked into. At the time, I thought it was exciting. She was confident, bold, a little bossy. But over the years that boldness has often crossed into being straight up bitchy. She has a habit of cutting people down with sarcasm. And yeah, sometimes that included me. But I always brushed it off, thinking it was just her sense of humor. For most of our marriage, I thought we were doing okay. We had the usual ups and downs, but nothing I considered abnormal. Or maybe I just ignored a lot of the red flags. Looking back now, I can see the signs were creeping in months before I realized what was happening. She started staying late at work more often, constantly on her phone with it flipped face down, and getting defensive whenever I asked simple questions. First, I chalked it up to stress. She's always had a short fuse, so when she'd snap at me for nagging, if I asked about dinner plans or who she was texting, I'd tell myself, don't push her buttons, she's probably just tired. I wanted to believe it was just life being stressful. But deep down, something was gnawing at me. That quiet little voice that whispers, something isn't right here. So, the actual discovery wasn't one big dramatic movie moment. It was a chain of little things that added up until I couldn't ignore them anymore. Started with her phone. She used to be careless with it, left it charging in the kitchen, sometimes even asked me to check her texts if she was busy. But then, all of a sudden, it became like a second limb. She'd take it with her even just to shower, and if I so much as glanced at it while it buzzed, she'd snap, "Can you not?" One night, I was doing laundry and her jeans were in the pile. I emptied the pockets and found a receipt for a fancy restaurant downtown. 2 entrees, 2 drinks, and a dessert. I hadn't been to that place in years, and I knew for damn sure I hadn't gone there with her. When I casually brought it up later, she rolled her eyes and said it was a work thing. Problem was, the date on the receipt was a Sunday. Then came the kicker. A buddy of mine saw her at the mall with some guy, arm in arm. He said he almost didn't tell me because he wasn't sure how I'd take it, but he couldn't shake the image. When I asked her about it, she laughed in my face and said my friend was just jealous of us and projecting his own failed marriage. I wanted to believe her, but that knot in my stomach wouldn't go away. And then, finally, the smoking gun. One night, she left her phone on the couch when she ran upstairs to grab something. The screen lit up, and there it was. Texts from a guy saved as Melissa from work. Except Melissa was asking her things like, "When can I see you again? Last night was amazing." I swear, my hands were shaking when I went upstairs with her phone. I didn't even feel like myself. I felt like I was watching some other guy live my life. I held the phone up and said, "Who's Melissa?" Because last I checked, Melissa doesn't usually ask you about amazing nights together. Her reaction, not guilt, not even shame. She rolled her eyes and groaned like I was the problem. She actually said, "Oh my God, you're seriously snooping through my phone now? That's pathetic." I pressed harder, and she tried to spin this insane story. Apparently, Melissa was a joke nickname for one of her guy coworkers, and they were just messing around in texts. She swore nothing physical ever happened, and if it did sound flirty, I was reading into it too much. But here's the thing, her face turned red. Not the embarrassed kind of red, the caught in a lie kind of red. And when I pointed out the restaurant receipt, the mall, and the late nights, she doubled down with even worse excuses. The restaurant? A team dinner. The mall? You know I hate shopping alone. Yeah, with some random guy's arm around you. The phone? Why are you so insecure? That last one hit me like a slap. Suddenly, I wasn't just the husband finding out his wife was cheating. I was now the insecure, controlling guy in her narrative. She actually stormed off mid-conversation, muttering that she couldn't deal with my drama tonight. I just stood there in the living room, holding her phone, staring at those messages. Every nerve in my body was screaming that she was lying through her teeth. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling while she snored beside me like nothing had happened. My chest felt like it had a 50-pound weight sitting on it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those texts flashing like neon signs. "When can I see you again? Last night was amazing." Anger came first. Pure, hot, white anger. I wanted to shake her awake and scream, "How could you do this to me? To us?" But then the anger would burn out, and I'd be left with this hollow pit of sadness, like someone had scooped my insides out. My mind kept running in circles, remembering all the times she brushed me off when I tried to be affectionate, all the snappy little comments about me being boring or predictable, the way she suddenly cared about her appearance more when she worked late. It all clicked into place like puzzle pieces I didn't want to admit were even on the table. And then came shame. Shame that I didn't see it sooner. Shame that I defended her when my friends raised eyebrows about her behavior. Shame that I let myself believe every flimsy lie she tossed at me. It felt like my marriage had already ended, but I was the last one to get the memo. 2 days later, I snapped. I couldn't just sit there pretending everything was fine while she played me for a fool. She was getting ready for another late night at work, which now felt like a sick joke, and I just lost it. I asked her straight up, "Who is he? Don't give me this Melissa crap again. Who is the guy you're seeing?" Her reaction was wild. She laughed. Actually laughed in my face and said, "Wow, you're obsessed. This is honestly embarrassing for you." That set me off. I told her I'd seen the texts, the receipts, that people had literally seen her out with another man. She went quiet for a second, then tried to turn it on me again. "Maybe if you weren't so paranoid and insecure, I wouldn't even feel the need to joke around with someone else." There it was, a half-admission wrapped in blame. When I pushed harder, she snapped back with, "Fine. You want the truth? Yes, I've been seeing someone, but it's not a big deal. It just happened because you've been so checked out lately. You don't even notice me anymore." The audacity. She admitted it like she was confessing to eating the last cookie, not blowing up our marriage. And instead of apologizing, she doubled down. "If you'd been a better husband, maybe I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere." I stood there shaking, staring at the woman I thought I knew, and I swear, in that moment she looked like a stranger. After that confrontation, I didn't know what to do with myself. I left the house and drove aimlessly for hours, just trying to think without my brain screaming. My emotions were all over the place. Rage, sadness, confusion, a weird numbness that made me feel like I was watching someone else's life. When I got home, she was asleep on the couch, phone tucked under her pillow, acting like nothing happened. I didn't even bother trying to talk to her that night. I just went into the guest room, closed the door, and stared at the ceiling again. The next morning, I started making lists. I wrote down every red flag I had ignored, every excuse she had thrown at me, every memory of the small betrayals that suddenly didn't feel so small. It helped a little. Seeing the truth on paper made it undeniable. I also reached out to my closest friends, who were shocked but supportive. I didn't ask for advice immediately. I just needed someone to acknowledge that what I was feeling was real and valid. I realized I couldn't process this alone. Somewhere in those first few days, I also realized something else. My life had been hijacked by her lies, and I had to figure out how to reclaim it. Not yet how or when, but that I would. The days that followed were a mess. 1 minute I was burning with anger, pacing the house, imagining confrontations, screaming at the air. The next, I'd crash into a deep sadness, staring at her side of the bed, feeling this crushing emptiness like my chest was a vacuum. I couldn't understand how someone I loved so much could treat me like this, lie to me with a straight face, and then act like it was my fault she sought attention elsewhere. And the worst part? She kept acting normal when I tried to talk. Sometimes bitchy, sometimes sweet, as if she could manipulate my emotions back and forth to keep me off balance. I found myself replaying memories, looking for signs I had missed. Those long work nights? The constant texting? The sudden obsession with her appearance? Every little thing now screamed betrayal. And the mental gymnastics she forced me into, "Oh, it's not cheating, you're just insecure," made me question my sanity. I started sleeping less, eating less. My friends noticed I was a shadow of myself. I realized this wasn't just heartbreak. It was emotional warfare. Every interaction with her became a minefield of emotions, and I felt like I was walking on shattered glass every time I even looked at her. Somewhere in all of this, I understood something terrifying. The person I loved might never be the person I thought I knew. One night, after another sleepless evening, I was scrolling through my phone, trying not to think about her, when it hit me, like a punch to the gut. I realized I was letting her control my emotions, my thoughts, my life. I was obsessed with her lies, her excuses, her manipulation. And for what? For someone who didn't respect me, didn't care about me, and couldn't even own up to the destruction she caused. That's when I had a moment of clarity. I didn't need to figure out why she cheated, or listen to her endless excuses. I didn't need her validation or apologies to know that what she did was wrong. I just needed to take control of my own life again. I remember standing in the kitchen, staring at my reflection in the window, and thinking, I can't live like this. Not like this, not anymore. My anger and hurt were still there, but instead of letting them swallow me, I let them fuel me. I finally realized that my next moves had to be about me and my future, not her and her lies. It didn't magically make the pain go away, but for the first time since discovering the affair, I felt a sliver of strength. A little hope that I could survive this and come out on the other side. After that night of clarity, I knew I had to make a decision. Do I try to patch things up, live with the betrayal and hope she changes? Or do I cut my losses and walk away before I lose more of myself? I spent days weighing it. Part of me still loved her, or at least the memory of who I thought she was. But every time I pictured staying, I saw the same pattern repeating. Lies, manipulation, excuses, and my own mental and emotional health eroding. I also considered the logistics, the apartment, shared finances, our routines, the life we had built. It was daunting. Ending a marriage is messy and painful. But the thought of pretending everything was okay while she continued to disrespect me felt even worse. Eventually, I realized it wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about self-respect. If I stayed, I'd be living someone else's narrative, constantly trying to justify her betrayal to myself. If I left, I could start rewriting my own. So, I made the hardest decision of my life. I would leave. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but because I deserved better. I couldn't control her actions, but I could control mine. And mine said, I will not be a fool in my own life. I knew I couldn't just disappear one day without any explanation. I had to tell her, and I had to do it clearly, without letting her manipulations derail me. So, one evening, I sat her down in the living room, heart pounding, palms sweaty, and said, we need to talk. About us, about what's happened. She immediately rolled her eyes and crossed her arms, like she was already preparing for a fight. I told her everything I had discovered. The texts, the receipts, the witnesses, and how I felt betrayed, disrespected, and manipulated. Her response? Classic deflection. She said, you're blowing this out of proportion. It wasn't even serious. You're just making a mountain out of a molehill. Then she tried to turn it on me again. Maybe if you'd been paying attention, I wouldn't have needed anyone else. I took a deep breath and let it wash over me. I realized no amount of justification or blame shifting could make me stay. So I said it plainly. I can't stay in this marriage. I can't trust you, and I can't be around someone who treats me like this. I'm leaving. She got loud, screaming, trying to guilt me, calling me dramatic, selfish, and overreacting. But for the first time, I didn't back down. I stayed calm, repeating that this was my decision, and it wasn't negotiable. It was brutal, one of the hardest conversations of my life. But when it was over, there was a strange sense of relief. The weight of pretending everything was okay finally lifted. The next few days were a blur of packing, organizing, and emotionally detaching. Every item I touched in the apartment felt like it carried memories. Some good, some twisted with betrayal. Even little things like our shared mugs or the blanket we fought over in winter now felt like relics of a life that wasn't real anymore. I kept a small notebook and started jotting down memories and thoughts as I packed, almost like a diary therapy session. I realized how much of myself I'd invested in someone who didn't value me. That realization stung, but it also made me stronger because I was finally reclaiming my own space, physically and mentally. She watched me pack like she was baffled that I could move on without her permission. She tried to guilt trip me. "You're really going to throw away 6 years over one mistake?" And even cried, which caught me off guard for a moment. But I had to remind myself, tears and performances don't erase months of lies and betrayal. By the end of the week, the apartment felt lighter, not empty, but free. Free of her manipulation, free of the constant anxiety, and free to start rebuilding myself without her shadow over every decision. Once I moved out, the emotional crash hit me like a freight train. I had physically separated from her, but the mental and emotional residue lingered. Nights were the hardest. The silence in my new place was deafening, and I kept replaying conversations, texts, and even the way she laughed at me during confrontations. I felt hollow, like a part of me had been ripped out. Every time I thought I was okay, a random memory would trigger a surge of anger, sadness, or regret. I questioned myself constantly. Did I do enough to save this? Was there something I could have done differently? At the same time, though, there was a strange clarity. Without her lies and manipulations surrounding me, I could finally see the truth of the situation. Her actions were never about me. They were about her selfishness. Accepting that helped me slowly untangle my emotions. I started journaling every night, venting everything I felt. It was messy, chaotic, and raw, but it was mine. For the first time in months, I could feel my own emotions without her twisting them, without the guilt trips and blame games. It was painful, yes, but also liberating. Slowly, I began to rebuild myself. At first, it was small things, making my bed in the morning, cooking meals I actually enjoyed, going for long walks without thinking about her. I started reconnecting with old friends I'd drifted from during the marriage, laughing again without feeling guilty, and realizing that my world didn't have to revolve around her drama. I even picked up hobbies I had abandoned. Playing guitar, sketching, reading late into the night, felt selfish in a good way, like I was finally allowed to care about me again. Each small victory, whether it was a day without dwelling on her or a night sleeping peacefully, felt monumental. Therapy helped too. Talking to a professional allowed me to untangle the knot of betrayal, anger, and self-doubt. I learned that her actions were a reflection of her character, not mine, and that healing wasn't linear. Some days were easy. Some days I still wanted to throw things, cry, or scream. But overall, the trend was upward. I was finally moving forward. Rediscovering myself made one thing crystal clear. I didn't need her validation, her lies, or her presence to live a full, happy life. Looking back, this whole experience has been brutal, but also strangely enlightening. Here's what I've learned. 1. Trust your instincts. That little voice nagging you that something isn't right? Listen to it. I ignored it for months, and it only prolonged the pain. 2. Boundaries matter. I realized I had let her disrespect me repeatedly without consequences. Setting clear emotional and physical boundaries is not just healthy, it's necessary. 3. You are not responsible for someone else's betrayal. No amount of blame, attention, or effort from me would have stopped her from cheating. Her choices were hers alone. 4. Self-care is more than a buzzword. Reconnecting with friends, hobbies, and your own passions isn't selfish. It's survival. 5. Healing takes time. There's no magic fix. Some days are setbacks, but they don't define the journey. Most importantly, I learned that I can survive this. I can rebuild, love myself, and eventually trust again. Betrayal is devastating, but it doesn't have to define the rest of your life. Here I am, months later, sitting in my own apartment, finally feeling like I'm reclaiming my life. I'm not over everything. Some scars will always remain, but I've learned to carry them without letting them weigh me down. If there's one thing I want anyone going through something similar to know, it's this: betrayal says more about the person who cheats than the person who is cheated on. Don't let someone else's selfishness dictate your worth or your happiness. Take your time to grieve. Cry, scream, journal, talk to friends, see a therapist. Whatever helps you process it. But don't get trapped in their web of lies or guilt trips. Protect yourself emotionally and physically. Reclaim your space, your mind, and your life. And finally, trust yourself. Trust your instincts, trust your feelings, and trust that you can come out the other side stronger. You'll get there. It's painful, it's messy, and it's heartbreaking. But freedom and self-respect are worth every ounce of struggle. So, to anyone reading this who suspects or knows they've been betrayed, you are not alone, you are not weak, and the life you deserve is still waiting for you.